Right, good morning everyone. Um, it's about 10 o'clock and let's get going. Alright, so this morning we're going to chat about Revit and modeling concrete structures and rebar in Revit. So my name is Shoal, I work for Micrographics. Alright, so the agenda is basically we're going to introduce the topic and then we're going to talk about the benefits of modeling these structural concrete elements as well as the rebar using Revit. We're going to talk about the rebar geometry, and we'll finish off with the shop drawings and bending schedules that you can produce from the geometry. Right, and then we'll conclude. Right. Okay, so the introduction is just basically we're going to look at this webinar. We're going to talk about the structural elements that we can produce as well as the rebar specifically. Now, just as a little bit of history, Autodesk has been working hard on the structural side of Revit, where they have past couple of years increased the functionality of the steel connections and steel whole new steel ribbon for steel connections in the structural sense, and then also they have increased the functionality specifically now for the in 2023 of the structural model that you can that's kind of disconnected from the structural geometry. Beams and columns now doesn't contain the actual analytical model, so the analytical model you can actually draw and obviously produce automatically from the structural geometry, but you can also draw it on your own. So that's quite a feat. I think that is a good addition and feature. Right, but we'll focus on obviously in tune with that, the structural modeling on the concrete side has also been worked on a lot. So there's lots of extra tools and that specifically rebar based, obviously concrete and that sort of thing, which we're going to focus on. All right. So let's just get to that. All right. So traditionally, the industry is modeled or did rebar schedules and for fabrication, etc., for within CAD or add-ons to AutoCAD, which obviously sped things up. From the hand drawing perspective, but now with Revit and the BIM technology, where you model objects in 3D, the benefits there is exponential, meaning that you can accurately model your components. From them, you generate your 2D sections and elevations without redrawing anything. And if you change the 3D model, then your 2D information adjusts, be it sizes or shape, that sort of thing. Right, and that also helps with clash detection when you're modeling rebar within these models. So if you doing rebar within the column or whatever you do, and the size change, you can very quickly see if there's clashes, etc., because it's all in 3D. So you can very quickly do that. There's also a tool built into Revit where you can do clashes between different models, but also within I think the same model. Right. Okay, so then also obviously we talked about the change management. That's a great benefit with all the BIM process, meaning that if you change something somewhere, it just updates the rest within that workflow. Right, and obviously it also not only in your design or area, it also increases the quality of the model further along the line, especially for prior maybe the bidding and also the procurement of the components, etc. All right. Also, there's different benefits for different industries within the kind of ecosystem. The designers or engineers that we kind of focus on, can see the components in 3D, and they've got a more clear insight to what they're doing. Whereas if it's typically in 2D, it's kind of a skill to read the drawings if it's all in 2D. So that's a good benefit that the BIM approach and the 3D helps the designer know what they're doing and also coordinate with other industries. Right, fabricators down the line. Fabricators, they can be more efficient because they've got more information within that BIM model, and they can reduce rework and coordination on site, so they can plan ahead of time and know what they in for, creating these rebar shapes. Right, and then contractors that put it all on site, they can also prevent obviously clashes, and they've got accurate quantities, and they exactly know what they need to have on site at a specific time. All right, so there's a lot of benefits, using Revit in this kind of idea or approach with regards to concrete and the rebar that's involved. Right, looking at the modeling side of the rebar specifically, and also the the components. Obviously, we focus more on the rebar in this webinar, but basically, with Revit, you can do any shape with regards to concrete, floors, columns, the standard shapes. You can also do in-place families in the full version of Revit, where the shapes can be very complex, meaning you can have concrete structures, and that's very complex. Now, that's just the modeling, but within that, your rebar lives as a parametric object. So if the change happened within the concrete model, be it the column changes height or size, then the rebar adjusts according to the dimensions of the structural item. The thinking of that sort of scenario, you have cover within a concrete element. That's the gap between the end of the rebar and the outside of the concrete object. So there's for water and moisture prevention. So that cover, obviously you can set up, and if the size of the column or floor or whatever changes, it also inhibits the rebar from protruding out in the so it keeps the cover intact. Right, so it's all parametric objects. You'll see there on the top right of the screen, there's some ways to draw the placing of the rebar. One of them is a sketch, where you can simply in a section or an elevation start sketching your shape or your bars, and Revit will actually recognize what you are doing and define a shape code to that if there is a shape library loaded. So by sketching it, it's not kind of just a random sketch. Revit will start recognizing the shape of the sketch as you make it. On the bottom left is just an example of the rebar cover settings, and you can describe the particular cover, and also give it a dimension. Alright, so this is quite a busy slide, but what I want to just stress out here is that when you're modeling these rebar geometry, you've got a lot of tools to actually do it. I did talk about the sketching, but the first one in the middle there at the top with the yellow bars, there is two main ways to place rebar. One is by 2 points, where you draw a rectangular shape, if that's a rectangular shape, and we could also draw certain shapes by the host extents, so it then conforms to the cover settings, and expands and fits itself into the extents of the object, which is great. So you don't have to physically draw lines. You can also draw these components in sets, so even though you draw one, you can, in the bottom left there's an example, you can have a layout, so it can either be singular, which is just the shape, or you can have a set. It can either be a fixed number or some spacing requirements, and then it's just if that beam or column or shape is varying in section size, like the little image there in the middle bottom, where on the left the beam is smaller than on the right. If you space these rebar sets along the beam, you just click it'll have the same size, but as soon as you click the varying rebar set on the little image there on the left, it will then expand and be adhere to the size of the shape of the beam as it goes along the beam, in the extents of, or covering the extents of the size of the beam. Right, so that's quite handy. Do very quickly. Just think about it. If you have a beam that's varying in size, typically you would model each individual little item. Here you can just say click a button, varying rebar set, and it just conforms to the size of the beam, which is great. Right, so on the right hand side we've also got tools for planar placing of rebar. So if you've got a concrete floor, concrete wall, or whatever, you can actually either have an area based rebar, where you can place those bars the top and the bottom of a floor perhaps, or a foundation, and also you can have path rebar. So around the openings there is a path, or on the edge of the slab there's a path created with specific shapes that you can assign. Right, now those path based items, if for instance in the wall, if those openings adjust, then all the rebar travels with that opening, so you don't have to redo the the modeling. Right, and there's also couplings, so if your bars are a certain length, you can join them to additional bars, and with a coupler, and that also helps with various levels that you produce, etc., etc. Right, and there's a lot of other tools that helps with the modeling of your rebar geometry. Right, then just moving over to more of now the documentation, or the preparation or the fabrication of the rebar. We've got built-in parameters. As you place these rebar items, they automatically have both numbering and partitioning parameters built in. The numbering, if you place a certain shape once and you give it a number, call it say shape or bar 1, then if you place in another column the same shape with the same size, it will automatically pull that or recognize that number and also have it say bar 1 or bar, so similar sized objects, rebar objects, will have the same numbering, and that kind of is auto matched. So you just place, and it'll the first one obviously your number, and then the rest get auto numbered. All right, so that helps in manually or not manually numbering each bar that you place. Right, and then obviously that can later on be scheduled and quantified, but we'll talk about that in the next slide. Right, then also there is partitioning that you can add. It's a built-in parameter that that helps with the construction sequence. So level 0 or ground level, you can have a certain partition, and then first floor you can have a certain partition and color code them at a later point, so that it makes it clear to the contractor which is which. All right, and then also you can obviously schedule based on those partition parameters, and then quantify and have the correct number of bars on site, etc., etc. All right, delivered. Okay, so that helps with the construction sequencing, having partitions added to certain bars. All right, so let's. You can see on the right there, it's color coded, and there's a couple of schedules involved there. All right. Okay, so once these objects are placed, the rebar, and once they kind of the parameters completed, you can then start producing views. Once you've got the views, like sections, elevations, maybe a little 3D item, you can present these rebar sets in various number of ways. The little image there in the top left, or top middle, there's various presentations that you can apply to a rebar set. With you can either have all the objects shown, all the rebar objects, or you can only have one in the middle, or on the sides, or etc. So you can present these rebars differently from view to view, meaning that and that's particularly for the documentation, so you don't over complex or you're simplifying the presentation of the rebar. Right, and then you've also got various tools to allow you to annotate these rebar items, as you can see in the various screen pictures there on the right hand side. You can see there's various annotations that you can add. You basically just click on the rebar, place the annotation, and obviously there's styles involved like any other kind of dimension in Revit, where you can adjust the style, how the rebar looks, and what it displays. Does it displays the bar thickness or the diameter, how many of the items, etc., etc. Okay, so that can all be defined in a particular style. All right, on the left is a little example of a connection there, concrete connection with a 3D little view with a couple of sections, and also the bending schedules, etc. All right, so that's quite a nice way of presenting it in that little 3D item as well. Okay, so moving on with the bending schedules. This is basically all these parameters are out of the box. So you've got ability to, the only thing that you might need to do is just create these shape images, but that's just an image that you can screenshot from a manual or a book or booklet, or you can draw it up yourself, or use a little detail item and create a JPEG of it, and then you add those shape images in there, and all the the quantities and each length will be is available out of the box. The bar lengths, the weight of each of those bars, etc., can be added and calculated, and everything is there to make these schedules valuable, right, for fabrication and construction. Right, so yeah, these you can add obviously formatting, at the top or on the sides, to just make it look better. All right, so this can obviously be placed on next to the physical item as well, so that you can reference the physical object. All right, so just to conclude, with all these tools in the structural modeling and rebar, we can always keep our Revit rebar and drawings up to date with the change management system that's built into Revit. So if you change sizes, all the components update. If you change a bar in plan, it will update in the section, that sort of thing. And in the schedules, you can obviously check, but that's the idea behind Revit. You can also very quickly pick up clashes if there are, and obviously that saves time and money in the long run. And the schedulings are always up to date, meaning that if you delete a bar or you change a bar or do something, it's reported in the scheduling. That kind of saves you a lot of time. There's also specific tools in Revit for rebar annotations that really helps with saving time. You don't have to document and annotate each individual item. All right, cool. So that's using Revit for the structural side. As I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of work has been, Autodesk has put a lot of work in the structural steel and concrete, as well as the analytical model side of Revit. So using Revit to do your structural rebar modeling is certainly something that to consider. Right. So thank you very much for attending the webinar, and if you've got any questions about this, etc., just let me know. At the bottom is my email address. You're welcome to email me some questions, etc., or go to our website, mgfx.co.za, and have a look at what we offer. Right, so thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll see you on the next one.